Hello and welcome to the big picture. The condition of the left parties in the country touched its nadir last year with its worst ever electoral performance in the Lok Sabha polls. This had been preceded by the left front losing in both West Bengal and Kerala, its two main bastions. Many have been tempted to write its obituary, saying that these parties have not been able to respond to the changing times, both politically and economically. The CPI-M, the leading party of the left front, meanwhile, which also is seeing its worst days, has just decided on a change of guard. After 10 years, the party has now elected a new General Secretary. Sitaram Yechury has taken over from Prakash Karat. Karat presided over the party as it touched new lows every election since he took over in 2005. Now with Yechury, new hopes are being generated. However, everyone agrees that he faces a huge challenge to revive the party first and the left forces and bring them together. What are these challenges and what is it that the new General Secretary of the CPI-M can do differently to stem the decline? Are the conditions ripe for the revival of the left forces in the country? These and many other questions need an answer. We will discuss all this today with Nilotpal Basu, Central Committee member of the CPI-M, who has just returned after an intense 6-day party congress in Vizag, Professor Aditya Mukherjee, historian from the Center for Historical Studies, JNU, Professor Rajeev Bhargava, political theorist from CSDS, and Neelabh Mishra, editor Outlook, Hindi. Welcome to all of you. Nilotpal, you people, pride on the fact that it is collective leadership which pushes the, which has been the guiding force of the party, and you continue to talk of collective leadership. How important is the General Secretary in this scheme of things?
See, first let me put the record straight, because after 2005, when Prakash Karat became General Secretary, 2006 we had a very impressive electoral performance in both Bengal and Kerala. So it will not be fair to say that all the elections have been lost since. One. Secondly, but yes, of course.
That it has been a...
Yeah. I mean, I don't contest that electorally we have been facing setbacks. But I mean, to put the record straight. Now, General Secretary is important in the sense that General Secretary actually coordinates the work of the Politburo and the Central Committee. He is the main spokesperson for the party. He articulates the vision of the party. And now, the fact that Sitaram has become the General Secretary is because of certain changes that we had envisaged earlier, where we limited the term of the General Secretary, and that is why there is a change of guard. So, I mean, it is not as if that we are responding just to the electoral setbacks. There are certain things we are trying to grapple with, and we have come to this conclusion that there were weaknesses so far as we are concerned in grappling with the 1991, post-1991 neoliberal process and its impact on politics, on society, on culture, and so many other areas. Now, we think that what is important to us, that we have simultaneously had this process of review of the past and come to certain concrete conclusions, which will be completed by the year end when we have an organizational plenum, because ultimately for communists, the kind of organizational orientation that you have to actualize what you decide on the political and ideological plane, and along with that you have a new General Secretary. So we hope to turn around definitely, and already we are seeing signs of that, because you see, we were also little pleasantly surprised by the interest of the mainstream media even about our party congress and what we were discussing. I think people are understanding that the kind of regime that we have in the country today, combination of worst right-wing corporate support and also the worst kind of communal Hindutva ideology that has come to dominate the government, it is only the left which can claim as natural claimants to the opposition space. How far we can organizationally achieve that is a different proposition.
Okay. Rajeev Bhargava,
Yep.
You think that in the scheme of the things in which the left parties function and operate, and the CPI-M, as you have known and seen and observed, you think that this change of guard can make any major changes in the way they function, in the way they present themselves?
Well, I think the first thing that I'd like to say is that there is a distinction between a left space and left parties. There is undoubtedly a need for groups, parties filling up this space, which we might call a left space. Whether left parties today can fill that space is another matter.
Right.
I would say that, yes, there is some hope, as there is hope when any kind of change takes place. This is also an important change. We have a new General Secretary who is widely regarded to be flexible. And I think there are two ways in which to look at this flexibility. One is the maneuverability that you have to bring together different political parties, different political formations on the same platform. Now, it is true that Sitaram Yechury certainly has that image that he is a networker and he can actually bring everybody together on the same platform, or he can certainly will not be an obstructionist. But there's another kind of flexibility that is required, and that is what we may call ideological flexibility. I mean, what's extremely important today is that we have a concrete analysis of a concrete situation with some values in the background and with some commitment from the heart. The values in the background are pretty simple. I mean, some degree of cohesion, social harmony, social justice, which is primary, freedom and equality. I mean, these are the values, and all of which are enshrined in our Constitution. And what is absolutely crucial for any politician and any political party or members of the political party to keep in mind is that you need to have a certain sensitivity and a certain degree of empathy and sympathy for all vulnerable sections of our society.
You think that was lacking in the left parties in the last few years?
You see, it's not that it's lacking, but I think that there is a tendency for any party to become part of an electoral regime and therefore be a kind of a cog in the wheel, where your only objective is to somehow get back to power and to sustain the status quo. It happens to every political party. The CPI-M or the left is not alone in this. And to some degree, I would say that, yes, being in power for 34 years in West Bengal and for quite some time in Kerala did erode the kind of sensitivity that it should have had for all the vulnerable sections. And by that, I don't mean only the strict, within quotes, the working class.
Okay. Okay. Professor Mukherjee, the fact that what Rajeev was, it had become an electoral machine. In fact, in the last, after 2006, even the electoral machine seemed to have eroded. As an electoral machine also. Now, so in the present context, how important is this leadership change?
I think it's extremely important, particularly because I don't agree that the left either was or should be only looking upon themselves as an electoral machine. That is, you measure the success of the left only in terms of how many seats they've got. The left has had, fortunately...
It is important.
It is important, but they've had far greater influence than the number of seats, and that's what is important. Now, that only comes when the left has a perspective that they want to create a large bloc, they want to keep the society in a particular direction, and not only necessarily how many seats they have won. It is that perspective. And here, I think Sitaram has an advantage. He is able to look upon more flexibly, as Rajeev said, at the situation and look at what is the big question today. The big question is, and that is where the left space is absolutely important. The big question is that the idea of India with which the Indian state was formed is seriously threatened. And in that, as again, if you read what Sitaram has been writing, brilliantly put with great imagery, he says that the Trishul, the Trishul of communalism, of anti-democracy, and of neoliberalism should not pierce the heart of India. So the heart of India is at stake. The nature of the state is at stake. I mean, on the poverty front, I mean, it's an absurd thing that we have for 25 years such high rates of growth, and 46% of our children are still malnutrition. I mean, there is no doubt that that is one big issue. But the even more important issue, in my opinion, is if we do not remain a secular state, then that is the end of democracy. And the left, and there I will slightly disagree with Nilotpal ji, that it is not only the left. The attitude that only the left can do it has to go. The left may provide the leadership.
No, as Rajeev rightly pointed out,
to be part of a
left
large
space and
coalition.
left parties, you know.
It's not only the left. You know, left must be part of a coalition which will make this change.
Neelabh, part of a coalition. One of the things which is being talked about, even Rajeev spoke about it. Everybody, Sitaram Yechury is seen as a networker, somebody who can take people along and things like that. But before that, he needs to stabilize and rebuild his own party. How easy is that?
That is the more difficult part, I would say, because India's demographics have changed.
It's you're talking of demographics. I was just going through one of the studies which CSDS has done of the last election. It shows the total voting, the total percentage of votes for the left party has come down to just 3% across the country.
Yes.
And they have lost their base among most of the people which they had.
Yeah. So it's not the same kind of resonance with the youth which the left had earlier. So there has to be an intervention geared towards that. A. B, what I notice is, I mean, in the base areas, the situation is different in the base areas of, say, Kerala and West Bengal. But then also they face a tremendous challenge, especially in West Bengal. And even in terms of alliance building elsewhere, if you look at the experience of 2004, in 2004, what had happened before that? I mean, how was India Shining punctured? India Shining was punctured, and there the left had a role in that, was that it built up alliances with a number of other civil society groups, which, as Rajeev Bhargava mentioned, were part of the left space in varying degrees of, tilt towards the left. And an alliance was built. A part of that was resulted in the World Social Forum process also, wherein various civil society groups came together, and left had a major role in that. And those alliances then went out to reach out to the mainstream opposition party, which was represented by the Congress. And under that pressure, Congress also had a slightly leftward tilt in its campaign than earlier. And that resulted in a broad coalition which unseated the BJP NDA then. Now, somewhere that process lost steam, especially after the fracas over nuclear deal. And what could have happened was, there was a break with the Congress on nuclear deal, and I think that break at that point of time was inevitable. But then that break should have been compensated for by a broader alliance building. So the kind of synergy you found between, say, in policy making between the NAC and the left, from two sides, a kind of pincer to the mainstream Congress, that synergy got lost somewhere in the second UPA regime. So that happened, and a lot of this younger generation is now going into all those civil society movements. And there the left would have to, somewhere it has, overcome many of its inhibitions earlier, even in Prakash Karat's time. For instance, an inhibition regarding funding, which if you read Prakash Karat's earlier essays in EPW or elsewhere, where he traces the funding pattern of so many other organizations. Or inhibitions towards, the extreme left, groups sympathetic to the extreme left. So there also some of those inhibitions have broken, but then they have not developed into a synergy. So there, and the another inhibition is, which has not broken, is that in any sort of mobilization, of front or joint front mobilization, the left always has to have, or especially the CPI-M, not all the left together, has to have a leadership role, and then only it will become part of a coalition. Now there I think you would have to think of those coalitions depending on the objective situation in various parts of the country. And there are certain other new movements, even on the net there are certain campaigns and movement where the left has to pitch in with, for instance, the net neutrality. The left has a position, I'm aware of that.
Now they have taken a position.
It has a position. But merely having a position is something else, and disseminating that position, actively going into it. Now, who's leading this whole movement on net neutrality? Part of it is also corporate driven.
Absolutely, corporate driven, and also
so there the left has to, actually mobilize the independent minded people who don't have a corporate agenda, and then get into that debate. Into that debate with
bigger. Okay.
I think
Nilotpal, several. One of the things which in your own party Congress, which was expressed, the view, the concern expressed was the rapidly decreasing membership among the younger generation. And all that he was talking about, Neelabh talking about, relates to younger generation.
You see, there are several questions, several observations, many of which we have come to agree with. There are some where we have disagreements as well. So I will just quickly run through the whole point. We totally agree with Professor Mukherjee's contention that left cannot be electoral left. It has a mission beyond elections, and of course that will be there. But what happens, that in fighting the kind of new policy paradigm, the governments also play a role. Sometimes people tend to underemphasize that. I think that is also not correct. We have to take a balanced position. How do we combine this parliamentary and non-parliamentary path? One. Secondly, I totally agree with Professor Rajeev Bhargava that you see the general principles. If you see our party Congress, what we have done, there are 5 or 6 components. One, that we have to strengthen our own party, because you cannot do anything, whatever is the order, unless you have a proper strong party. Number 2 is primarily the left and expand the left. So go beyond your own left parties which were there with you. So we have started interacting, we have having joint programs with SUCI Communist or CPI-ML and so on and so forth. Thirdly, what we are saying, that there is a very good possibility, it is particularly clear in the trade unions, that go to unite all trade unions on issues where the policies of the government are affecting the working class, and that is happening. And now, on the land acquisition ordinance, it has started happening even in the sphere of peasantry. Now, then the fourth component is very, very important, that what he is saying. We also consider that this idea of India has to be rescued somehow, and therefore you go for the broadest possible platform, including all political forces. It may not be in the name, because, name-wise, because there is a confusion, because you see, as I pointed out, that this is a coalition between corporates and Hindutva forces. Therefore, that pro-corporate policy who had been pushing, unless you demarcate from them, this platform also gets a little undermined. Therefore, we have said that bring in all those forces, may not be in name, but whosoever wants to be in favor of saving the idea of India, everybody should join. And eventually, we are saying that not just this, you have to put together a vision of an alternative, as Professor, and there you link not only with these formal parties, but groups, individuals, social movements, people's movement, citizens' movement. You see, there we have incorporated the whole idea of really making this a process whereby left parties come closer to correspond to what Professor Bhargava is referring to as
okay, Professor Rajeev Bhargava. You think the situation as it prevails today in this country, Professor Mukherjee talks about the idea of India, but among the younger generation, among the generation which has given 208, among the people which has given 280 more 300 seats to the BJP and its allies, you think that the idea which Nilotpal is talking about, will have some echo? Is it how difficult or how easy is it to get these people around to this kind of thinking now that you see the younger generation is in a completely different mode?
Girish, just 1 minute if you give me before he
very quickly,
because this is very important. That about the net neutrality and all those issues, we know corporates are there. But you see, we have created an organization called Free Software Foundation, which has having a major role. And about young people also, the Modi campaign before the election, they did not tell young girls that if Modi comes to power, we will decide how many children you produce or things like that. So we think that, the young people are, there is a mechanical understanding about the young people that they are only carrier.
No, we don't know whether it's mechanical. Professor Bhargava?
Yeah, I think that for a very large number of people who are young, particularly women, and I'm sure it must be true for even Dalits and other, groups, the idea of India remains very, very relevant. I do not think that this election is any indication of the rejection of the idea of India. I think people believed that while the idea of India, broadly speaking, will remain intact, Mr. Modi will somehow quicken the pace of growth and actually consolidate the idea of India by bringing more and more people into the net of better quality of life and so on and so forth. So I think there is a very small and very offensive section in political parties such as the BJP and outside as well, which is very vigorously challenging the idea. But I don't think that, as I pointed out, that the seats that have gone to Mr. Modi are any indication of the rejection of the people of India, of the idea of India.
Professor Mukherjee? I think Neelabh wants to say. Neelabh,
I think more than the idea of India, the narrative, the intervention is required in the narrative of nationalism. We had a narrative of nationalism during the freedom movement, leading up to the fight against British colonialism. A narrative of nationalism after that, and which provided also broad parameters to our intervention in the world outside, resulting in non-aligned movement. That narrative of nationalism has undergone a sea change, even among the people who broadly subscribe to the idea of India in other ways. People who believe in a secular India, or people who believe in for instance, an India with democracy of its own, with even in certain cases equality and all. But then that narrative of aggressive nationalism has become part of their mental landscape as well. So where the left has to intervene, I think, is in providing a very different, very coherent, a robust alternative vision in its narrative of nationalism.
Come in for a second. I actually agree with Neelabh. I think very often many intellectuals, they leave the narrative of nationalism altogether once they face this very aggressive kind of nationalism. I think the point is to develop a self-critical nationalism that is compatible with international moral norms. leaving the terrain of nationalism is a disaster. And I think
half a sentence that, again to borrow from Sitaram the expression, what we are saying that a non-secular India cannot ensure growth.
Absolutely.
Which Modi is proposing.
Yes,
this idea that this narrative of nationalism that Modi represents has somehow captured the country is false. Is my first point. The idea that the demographics has now moved against the left is again also wrong. The youth are idealistic by and large. They are the natural allies of the left. Wherever the left has provided leadership, they've moved there. The people who voted AAP into power essentially used all the elements that the left should have been doing. They were for the poor, they were for democracy, they were for secularism. That's what people... So there is a huge upsurge. If indeed the narrative had changed, then with the BJP in power, in central power, not even in the states, we would have had a Hindu state. We are far, miles away from it because the people still do not accept it. You know, people in the rural areas, the younger people, their idea of India may have captured the imagination of the NRIs who Modi meets. But it is certainly not yet, fortunately, the imagination of the Indian people, except in pockets where they create riots situations. You know, this narrative of this aggressive Hindu India is what happens. And I agree with Rajeev there. People voted Modi into power because they thought the previous government was doing nothing. Here is the man, there is chaos and the savior will come and push growth and development. People did not vote for Hindutva. And, you know, so I don't agree that their narrative is the narrative.
The narrative of people hasn't changed. I am saying the narrative which is being projected. It's a subjective failure of the left. It's not the failure of the people. It's not the failure of the youth. You know, youth, I'm not saying that the youth is anti-left. What I'm saying is the left failed to capitalize.
I completely agree with him, and we want to assure, I mean, across here also in your studio, that we will get back to everybody, because we think that absolutely whosoever is interested in the future of this country, particularly the young people, they have to be drawn in. Naturally, there will be limitations as political parties. There will be something what we will be doing. But we will be trying to actually identify areas of agreement. And to assure Professor Bhargava, another point that we have categorically concluded is that we have to build, along with class alliances, a social alliance as well. Therefore, there is a specific emphasis on that, how to reach out to tribals, how to reach out to Dalits, how to reach out to minorities, and so on and so forth.
Okay. So, very quick last words to, actually the last word will go to Rajeev Bhargava. Rajeev Bhargava, you think that, you know, the left, especially the CPI-M, now, you know, what is it that they should concentrate on? Because the question is of the electoral performance of theirs is, you know, pretty the lowest it has reached. Now, if they are going to concentrate on their electoral performance, will they be neglecting the other aspects which we were talking about?
No, I don't think they need to do that. I think, I think the left parties have to realize that the left space is much broader and much greater than the parties. And people who occupy, or institutions that occupy that space, have their own internal logic, they have their own integrity, they have their own internal dynamics, and that has to be respected. The party cannot dictate to them. There has to be an alliance, there has to be a mutual kind of cooperation among all left, broadly, all left people.
Okay.
But the integrity and the coherence of all these groups. I mean, take, for example, intellectuals.
We don't have time for examples.
Just one second. A whole lot of intellectuals would claim or believe that they are left, but they are not willing to associate themselves with
the left parties.
Political parties. I think that
very quickly, we completely wrong.
One line. The class alliances, and he's saying that we must now bring in social alliances. What the left has to be very careful is that in the name of bringing in social alliance, they do not pander to identity politics. If they do, then the BJP will come back romping.
Okay. I think that's you put a very important point at the end of the program. In fact, that itself is a separate point for discussion as we go along. So we'll wait and watch how all this will develop. Thanks to all my guests. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue, big picture, same time tomorrow.